In the quiet village of Elderwood, nestled between misty mountains and ancient forests, there lived a young woman named Elena. She was known for her wild spirit and unconventional ways, which often clashed with the rigid traditions of her community. While other young women prepared for marriage and settled into predictable lives, Elena dreamed of adventure and freedom. The village elders had long watched her with suspicion. Her independent nature, her refusal to follow typical expectations, and her mysterious knowledge of healing herbs made her an outsider. Whispers spread like wildfire, suggesting she practiced forbidden magic and communed with spirits that should be left undisturbed. One cold autumn evening, during the harvest festival, everything changed. A series of unexplained events began to unsettle the villagers. Livestock fell ill, crops withered mysteriously, and strange shadows appeared at the edges of the settlement. The elders quickly pointed their fingers at Elena, claiming her unusual practices had brought a curse upon their peaceful community. The village council gathered in the central square, their faces stern and unforgiving. Elena stood before them, her head held high, refusing to show fear despite knowing her fate was already decided. The oldest elder, a weathered man named Gregor, spoke with a voice like cracking stone. He declared her responsible for the village's misfortunes and pronounced her sentence, complete banishment. Her punishment was swift and brutal. By sunrise the next morning, Elena would be stripped of her belongings, her family connections, and her place in the community. She was to be escorted to the forest's edge and told never to return, with the threat of death if she attempted to come back. That night, as preparations for her exile were made, Elena prepared quietly. She gathered a small bundle of essential herbs, a worn leather pouch containing her most treasured possessions, and a knife her father had given her years ago. Her family, torn between fear and love, said nothing. Her mother wept silently in the corner, while her father's face remained a mask of stone. At dawn, surrounded by armed villagers, Elena was marched to the forest's boundary. The cool morning mist wrapped around her like a protective cloak. She looked back one last time at the only home she had ever known, memorizing every detail of the village that was rejecting her. The head guard roughly pushed her forward. "Walk," he commanded, "and never return." Elena took her first steps into the unknown, her heart racing with a mixture of terror and unexpected excitement. The forest seemed to welcome her, its ancient trees creating a green tunnel that swallowed her slowly from view. She did not cry. She did not look back. What the villagers did not know was that Elena carried with her a secret, a knowledge passed down through generations, a connection to the land that ran deeper than their simple understanding. Her banishment was not an end, but a beginning. As she walked deeper into the forest, the trees seemed to whisper around her. Shadows moved in ways that suggested more than mere wind. Elena's hand instinctively touched the leather pouch at her side, feeling the small objects inside that represented her true inheritance. The village of Elderwood would soon discover that banishing Elena was not a solution, but the start of a transformation neither they nor she could have predicted. Her journey was just beginning, and the wilderness held mysteries far greater than the small minds of her former community could comprehend. Night was falling, and Elena walked on, her silhouette becoming one with the darkening forest, her fate intertwined with the ancient spirits that watched her every step. In the depths of the forest, Elena learned survival was not a choice, but a necessity. Days turned into weeks, and she discovered strengths she never knew existed within herself. The wilderness became her teacher, its harsh lessons etching themselves into her skin and spirit. Her first winter was brutal. Cold winds cut through her thin clothing, and finding food became a daily challenge. She learned to set traps, recognize edible plants, and create shelter from fallen branches and moss. Slowly, her city-bred softness transformed into a raw, resilient strength. One particularly harsh night, while huddled near a small fire, Elena encountered an old woman who seemed to emerge from the forest itself. Unlike the villagers who had cast her out, this woman looked at her with understanding eyes. She was a wandering healer, weathered by years of traveling and knowledge. The old woman, named Mara, recognized something special in Elena. She saw beyond the frightened young woman and noticed a rare connection to the natural world. Without judgment, Mara began teaching Elena the ancient arts of herbal healing, plant communication, and understanding the subtle energies that flow through living things. Your banishment is not a punishment, Mara would say, but a liberation. The village fears what it cannot understand. Under Mara's guidance, Elena learned to read the language of trees, to understand the whispers of wind, and to heal using methods forgotten by most. She discovered that her earlier intuitions about herbs and healing were just the beginning of a much deeper knowledge. Months passed, and Elena's skills grew. She could now create powerful medicines from plants that seemed ordinary to untrained eyes. She understood how certain roots could stop fever, how specific bark could heal wounds, and how particular combinations could bring strength to the weakest body. But Elena's true power was not just in healing. She began to understand that her connection to the land was something extraordinary. Animals seemed to sense her presence differently. Wolves would watch her from a distance without aggression. Birds would come closer than they would to any other. Human, and even the most skittish forest creatures felt a strange comfort around her. As her power grew, so did her understanding of why the villagers had feared her. She was different, not just in skill, but in her entire way of being. The energy that flowed through her was something ancient and powerful, something that did not conform to the small, controlled world of Elderwood. Mara, recognizing Elena's potential, began teaching her more than just healing. She taught her about the old ways, about the balance between humans and nature, about the magic that existed in the subtle spaces between what people could see and what remained hidden. Your banishment was their greatest mistake, Mara would often say. They thought they were protecting themselves, but they were actually setting you free. Years passed, and Elena transformed from a scared, banished young woman into a powerful healer and guardian of the forest. Her reputation began to spread among the scattered communities near the woodland, whispers of a woman who could heal impossible wounds, who understood the language of plants and animals better than any traditional doctor. Some hunters and travelers would seek her out, bringing gifts and requesting her help. She never turned anyone away, treating everyone with the same careful compassion she had been denied in her own village. Meanwhile, in Elderwood, stories about Elena became legend. Some spoke of her with fear, others with a strange mix of respect and uncertainty. The village that had once rejected her now told stories around winter fires about the mysterious forest healer who seemed more spirit than human. Elena never sought revenge. Her heart had grown too large, too connected to the natural world to harbor such small human emotions. Instead, she understood that her banishment was merely a path to her true calling, a journey of transformation that would have been impossible within the narrow confines of her original life. As another winter approached, Elena stood at the edge of her forest home, looking out over the misty landscape. She was no longer the frightened young woman who had been pushed out of Elderwood. She was a force of nature, powerful and serene, completely and utterly free. The forest around Elena began to change subtly. Trees seemed healthier, wildlife more abundant, and the very air felt different. What started as her personal sanctuary slowly transformed into something more, a living, breathing ecosystem that responded to her presence. Word spread quietly about the woman who could heal impossible wounds and communicate with nature in ways no one understood. Travelers would speak in hushed tones about a mysterious healer who lived deep in the woods, someone who could cure illnesses that doctors had given up on. One summer, a young boy from a distant village was brought to her. He was dying from a strange fever that had killed several children in his community. His desperate parents, having heard whispers of her abilities, carried him through dangerous forest paths. Elena worked for days using combinations of rare herbs and techniques Mara had taught her. She created poultices that drew out the fever, prepared strange teas that seemed to speak directly to the boy's weakened body. Slowly, miraculously, He recovered. News of this healing spread like wildfire. More people began to seek her out, bringing gifts of food, cloth, and rare items in exchange for her help. But Elena was never motivated by payment. She understood her role was deeper. She was a guardian, a bridge between the human world and the natural realm. Her connection with the forest grew stronger. Animals became her allies. Wolves would warn her of approaching strangers. Birds would carry messages across vast distances, and even the smallest insects seemed to communicate with her. It was as if the entire forest had adopted her as its protector. Mara, growing older, began teaching Elena the deepest secrets of their ancient healing traditions. These were not just medical techniques, but profound understandings of life's interconnectedness. Elena learned how every plant, every creature had a role, a purpose that went beyond simple survival. As years passed, the area around her forest home began to change. Lands that were once barren started producing crops. Streams that had been nearly dry became vibrant water sources. The ecosystem was healing, expanding, becoming something more than it had been before her arrival. The villagers of Elderwood heard these stories but remained divided. Some saw her as a witch, others as a mysterious guardian. The elders who had banished her years ago were now old or gone, replaced by a new generation curious about the legends. Elena never sought to return or prove anything to her former community. Her world had expanded far beyond the small boundaries of village politics. She had become something more, a living connection between human survival and nature's wisdom. Her medicines became legendary. People would travel for weeks to seek her help, bringing stories from distant lands. She treated everyone equally, the rich, the poor, strangers, and occasional travelers. Her only requirement was respect for the natural world. Interestingly, children seemed to understand her best. They would approach without fear, sensing something pure in her energy. They would sit for hours watching her work, learning without words, absorbing the deep connection she had with everything around her. The forest itself seemed to breathe differently. Where once it had been just a collection of trees and wildlife, it now felt like a living, intelligent entity. Animals moved with purpose, plants grew with unusual vitality, and the very air felt charged with a mysterious energy. Elena's reputation grew, but she remained unchanged. She continued her daily rituals of healing, gathering, and understanding. Her home was a simple structure, built from fallen trees and surrounded by medicinal plants she had carefully cultivated. As another year passed, she realized her banishment had been the greatest gift. What the villagers had meant as punishment had become her path to true freedom. She was no longer just a person but a force of nature, silent, powerful, deeply connected. The forest kept her secrets, and she continued her silent expansion, healing, growing, becoming something beyond human understanding, a guardian of life itself. The summer was unusually hot when trouble arrived at Elena's forest. A group of men from Elderwood, led by Marcus, the son of the elder who had originally banished her, came with dark intentions. They carried weapons and wore expressions of deep hatred. Years of fear and misunderstood stories had festered in their community. Rumors claimed Elena was responsible for strange events, crops failing in distant villages, mysterious illnesses, and unexplained deaths. These men believed they were bringing justice, not understanding that they were about to challenge something far beyond their comprehension. Marcus remembered the stories his father had told him about the woman who was cast out. He had grown up hearing how she was dangerous, how her very existence threatened their community's safety. Now, he wanted to end what his father had started years ago. As they approached her forest home, something strange began to happen. The forest itself seemed to resist their movement. Branches twisted unexpectedly, creating barriers. Roots emerged from the ground, making their path difficult. Animals watched with unusual intensity, their eyes following every move. Elena knew they were coming. The forest had been whispering warnings since dawn. She was not afraid. Years of preparation, of understanding, had transformed her from a scared young woman into a powerful guardian. When the men finally broke through to her clearing, they found Elena standing calmly. She wore simple clothes made from plant fibers, her hair braided with herbs. Behind her, medicinal plants swayed, though no wind was blowing. "You are not welcome here," she said simply, her voice calm and steady. Marcus stepped forward, his sword drawn. "We're here to end the curse you've brought upon our lands," he declared, believing every word. But Elena understood something they did not. The true power was not in fighting, but in understanding. She began to speak, not with anger, but with a deep, resonant voice that seemed to come from the earth itself. She told them about the real story, how nature works, how every action has consequences, how their own practices of farming and living had damaged the very land that sustained them. She spoke about balance, about respect, about the intricate connections between all living things. As she spoke, something extraordinary happened. The men began to change. Their aggressive postures softened. The forest around them seemed to breathe, to listen. Animals emerged from hiding, watching silently. Marcus found himself unable to move his sword. His hand, which moments ago gripped the weapon tightly, now felt weak. The hatred that had driven him began to dissolve, replaced by a strange understanding. Elena showed them how their own actions had caused the problems they blamed her for. She revealed how their farming methods destroyed soil, how their treatment of the land had created the very issues they feared. She was not a witch or a curse. She was a teacher. Hours passed. The men who had come to destroy her now sat listening, their weapons forgotten. They learned about sustainable farming, about working with nature instead of against it. Elena shared knowledge that had been forgotten by their community for generations. As evening approached, something remarkable happened. The forest, which had been tense and watchful, began to relax. Animals returned to their routines. Plants seemed to straighten, as if breathing a collective sigh of relief. Marcus and his men left different people. They carried not weapons, but knowledge. They understood now that Elena was not their enemy, but someone who understood the world in ways they had never imagined. In Elderwood, everything would change. The stories would no longer be about a dangerous witch, but about a woman who understood the language of the earth. A woman who had been rejected, but who had found her true purpose. Elena returned to her home surrounded by her forest allies. She knew this was not an end, but another beginning. The forest continued its silent, powerful expansion, healing, growing, transforming, just as she had. The reckoning was not about violence or revenge. It was about understanding, about seeing the world not as something to be conquered, but as a living, breathing system of which humans were just one small part. Of the world changed slowly, almost imperceptibly. What began in Elena's small forest gradually spread beyond earthly boundaries, touching something far greater than anyone could have imagined. Scientists first noticed strange changes in global ecosystems. Plants grew differently. Animals behaved with unprecedented intelligence. Environmental patterns shifted in ways that defied traditional scientific understanding. And at the center of these transformations stood Elena, though few understood her true role. Her connection with nature had evolved into something that transcended human comprehension. The energy she had cultivated, part healing, part communication, began to interact with systems far beyond Earth's surface. Satellites recorded unusual electromagnetic patterns emerging from her forest region, patterns that seemed to pulse with an intelligent rhythm. Researchers from different countries started investigating. They discovered that the healing techniques Elena had learned were not just local traditions, but a complex communication system with the planet's fundamental energy network. What looked like simple herbal medicine was actually a sophisticated method of ecological restoration. Unexpectedly, these findings attracted attention from unexpected sources. A group of international scientists and quantum researchers became fascinated. They recognized that Elena's practices were more than traditional healing. They represented a new understanding of planetary interconnectedness. One summer evening, a strange spacecraft descended near her forest. Unlike dramatic movie scenes, its arrival was quiet, almost respectful. The beings inside were not invaders but observers, entities that had been monitoring Earth's evolutionary progress. These beings understood what humans had forgotten, that true power lies in harmony, not domination. They saw in Elena a bridge, someone who could communicate not just with Earth's ecosystems but potentially with larger cosmic systems. Communication happened not through words but through energy exchanges. Elena discovered she could understand their intentions without traditional language. They shared knowledge about planetary healing, about cosmic interconnectedness, about the delicate balance of living systems across different dimensions. The visitors revealed that Earth was experiencing a critical transformation. Humanity stood at a crucial point. Either they would learn to work with their planet's natural systems or face potential ecological collapse. Elena represented a potential pathway, a model of how humans could evolve. Her forest became a research site, but not in the traditional sense. Scientists and cosmic observers studied how she maintained perfect ecological balance. They were fascinated by her ability to communicate with multiple life forms, to heal complex systemic issues without invasive interventions. Interestingly, the people of Elderwood, who had once rejected her, now celebrated her achievements. The village transformed its agricultural practices, adopting the sustainable methods Elena had demonstrated. Her earlier banishment was now seen as a blessing that had allowed her unique abilities to develop. The cosmic visitors did not remain long. Their mission was observation, understanding, and subtle guidance. They recognized that true planetary evolution must come from within, not through external intervention. Elena was their chosen messenger, though she never saw herself that way. Her daily life continued much the same. She still healed, still communicated with her forest, still lived simply. But now her actions resonated on a galactic scale. The energy she generated spread far beyond her immediate environment, touching systems humans hadn't even conceptualized. Quantum researchers began documenting unprecedented phenomena. Healing frequencies from her forest seemed to create positive mutations in plant and animal systems. Ecological dead zones started recovering. Species thought extinct began showing signs of regeneration. Elena understood something profound. Her banishment was never a punishment, but a precise cosmic arrangement. By removing her from traditional human constraints, she had been allowed to develop capabilities that could potentially save not just a planet, but potentially influence broader universal systems. As years passed, her legend grew. She was no longer just a forest healer or a rejected villager. She had become a symbol of planetary transformation, a living example of how individual consciousness could create massive systemic changes. The new galactic order was not about conquest or technology. It was about understanding, about recognizing the profound interconnectedness of all living systems. And Elena, once a simple woman cast out from her village, had become its unexpected architect. Her forest continued to breathe, to grow, to heal, a living testament to the extraordinary potential that exists when humans align with the deeper rhythms of existence.